Welcome back and thank you for staying with us right here in Morning at NTV. Well, let's get into our Kickstarter conversation. Opposition coalition ahead of the 2021 election, and is a scientific election viable for 2021? Those are the two topics we're going to be taking a look at with Dr. Zach Nirinjie. So yesterday, the opposition unveiled a new vehicle. Yes, they do call it a new vehicle for change, dubbed United Forces of Change. But what makes it different? Later today, the Electoral Commission will also be announcing a new roadmap. Yes, what joins these two events? To speak to us about these and more, we do have Bishop Zach Nirinjie, the former Assistant Bishop of Kampala, who is a keen political observer. Many thanks and thank you for joining us right here on Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
I would like to take you back to 2012 before we get into the United Forces for Change, to just understand, for my viewer, to understand what Dr. Zach Nirinjie has been up to since you retired from official pastoral duties in 2012 to focus on advocating for social justice, social peace, and social reforms right here, social and political reforms right here in Uganda. Have you achieved those targets? How has your journey been?
Well, first, to clarify, I'm not just a political observer.
Yes.
I'm a political activist.
Right.
I'm committed to seeing change, positive change
Yes.
In this country,
Yeah.
and a change that is sustainable.
Of course, we saw you take that route in 2012.
Yeah,
and many
so
people were
absolutely.
amazed.
So that's that, and the journey, it's a journey.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. It's a journey. The journey presses on. Do we have a state of affairs in this country that we are proud of? The answer is no. We still have a dictatorship in charge. It's a military dictatorship. The journey continues. Do you have a sense in which there is the country is mobilized for that change? Absolutely, absolutely. The current issue, the biggest issue, is leadership. And I need to actually clarify this, because people often want to cast me in the light of opposition, you know. No, this is not about opposition. This is about the future of this country. This is a future that we hold together, whether you are yellow or blue or red or whatever color it is. This is about the future of this country. This is about our children. This is about the women in the hospitals. Are they giving birth? This is about youth employment. These are the issues. This is about ensuring that people who manage public resources are accountable, not the kind of rot we have right now in the government. So have we achieved any of those? Let me tell you, it's a challenge, and it's not for me. The whole country. That's a question we must ask ourselves. How close are we to ensuring that this country becomes the kind of country that we are all proud of? A country in which we all really are flourishing, in which jobs are available for young people graduating, in which hospitals function, in which, truth be told, it's worse than it was 8 years ago. That's the sad story. However, I could say that the country is mobilized, the country is ready, the country has waited too long for change.
And of course, when the president launched his walk, you remember that memorial walk where he was highlighting the fight against corruption? You went so hard against the president, saying, has the president gone back to the level of an activist? And you did say that you didn't expect anything to come out of that. But then we've seen the president change his style. Officials are being fired, left, right, and central. Officials that are being accused of corruption. Do you think the president is now more hands-on on this fight against corruption?
Let's not go there, please, because now you're going to cause me.
No. I'm trying to paint a picture where it's getting better.
No, please,
it's getting
let's
better.
not try that, because if you go by President Museveni's statements, please, let's not even try that, because this regime, Museveni's regime, survives by corruption.
I've read the articles. That's what you've been saying for the last 8 years.
So it's evident. It's evident. Look at the way they've managed this COVID-19. It's unbelievable. There's no accountability. We don't know. And the citizen, the people are the least being considered. Have you seen General Museveni announce any measures to rescue businesses that are collapsing, to support? Remember, they tried to distribute food. Remember what happened? Hello, do you remember?
Yes, I do.
They couldn't even distribute food because the entire machinery is corrupt to the core. That's a real challenge. So we are here. This is our country. And we all, especially those of us in leadership of any kind, whether it is in church or society, professional, wherever we are, it is our responsibility to work for a way in which even, you know, the people who steal from us, they're our brothers and sisters, they're our cousins, please. So we shouldn't characterize them as them. They're part of, you know, we attend weddings with them, we go to church with them, they are part of us. That's the story we have in this country. So my view is this: is it better? The answer is absolutely no. Is it worse? Absolutely yes. The evidence is in the way this COVID money. Do you remember what happened in Parliament? So please, let's not go there. Do you remember the 40 million, 20 million, 200 million? Yeah. Oh my goodness, now we don't even know how much. Yeah? Billions. These guys stealing billions. So that's the crisis. The evidence of which is what's happened to our school system, what's happened to our medical care system, what's happened to, you know, you can see, if you can't distribute food. You know, the other day I saw a clip of a family that was cooking peelings, potato and matoke peelings. It's real. We connected with that family. It is for real. My brother, that is happening in this country.
All right, Dr. Zack Ndingyie, let's now focus on these forthcoming elections. Dr. Kizza Besigye, the retired Kano, and Bobi Wine, Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi, came out yesterday and decided, you know what, enough is enough. We cannot trust Mr. Museveni as a disgruntled group. And they decided to come together. And this group is now dubbed the United Forces for Change. Do you think this coalition has what it takes to actually trust President Museveni come 2021? But let's start with the timing.
To be honest, I think that the desire for unity in order to remove dictatorship, military dictatorship, to remove from the management of state power those who abuse it, I think they cry for the country. So the idea that there needs to be unity, and let me also clarify, this is not NRM opposition. That's not what it is. Yes. It's about the whole country gathered together, because it's not, there are no oppositions that are suffering alone or NRMs that are suffering alone. I always remind people, if anybody wants to know that this is not opposition versus NRM, is ask the Right Honorable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Mama Mbabazi. If there's anybody who was NRM to the core, and is who he is, but clearly in the cold. So let's not paint the narrative as though this is opposition versus. No, this is a country agenda that we must focus on. So the question of unity, there's absolutely no question. I mean, you remember I was deeply involved in gathering people from across the political spectrum, across society, under the Democratic Alliance. The TDA was simply an idea. That idea hasn't died. The idea is alive. And there's absolutely no question that the future belongs to us together. And therefore, that future must be crafted through a united political process, a process in which people are included. So, is the timing for Honorable Kyagulanyi and retired Colonel Kizza Besigye, is the timing good? He should have done them yesterday. It should have happened. I mean, there should be more unity in this country. But it's not a unity around opposition. It's a unity around a country, a future that we all can partake of. Absolutely no question. However, any unity efforts face a major challenge, and it's what I call the trust deficit. Trust deficit. There's absolutely no doubt that General Museveni and his team face a massive trust deficit. The country doesn't trust, absolutely. You know, let's not even go to the management of COVID. You know, in the initial period, the measures are important, they are good, but now you're beginning to hear the numbers, so trust deficit. Can we trust General Museveni and his team? And the answer is no. General Museveni has been shifting gear, you know, shifting goals. The challenge of the trust deficit from those who seek to wrest power from him does exist. There's absolutely no doubt that the failure of the Democratic Alliance created a massive trust deficit for this country. Can we trust those who seek to wrest power from General Museveni? And that, I would say, my friends, whether in the movement or FDC or People Power have to really recognize that they come to this place, this time, when the country is asking, can we trust our leaders? So the first thing that the country is waiting for is to see, can we trust Kano Besigye? Can we trust Bobby Wine? Can we trust a united front? Or is it the same old story of people coming together simply for their selfish interests, as is the story of what is happening in the regime, in government, as is the story, you see the fighting against one another rather than fighting together. So these are deep questions that people are not really going to be, oh, they have come together. No, no, that's not the... People have seen this before. We have a long history of people coming together, but that coming together doesn't seem to add up to anything. So the critical question is that and as I say to you, it's not just Honorable Kyagulanyi and Kano Besigye, it's the whole country. We've got to ask, are we going to be united together to create a future that works for us, not a future that works for a few?
And that's the question that is being asked by the voter. Can the voter trust that the United Forces for Change pressure group won't disintegrate like the Democratic Alliance? Can they trust that they won't disintegrate?
Can the citizen of this country trust anybody in political leadership today? That is the biggest question. It's not a question for only Kano Besigye, Honorable Kyagulanyi, United Forces for Change. It is a question for anybody providing political leadership. In fact, for me, as a faith leader, it's not just for those in political space. It's also the religious faith leadership. Can we trust our bishops and clergy to embody our hopes, our fears for the future? Because again, you hear the religious leadership is numb, the cultural leadership is numb, all being co-opted. The question really that you ask is not just for United Forces for Change. It's actually for all levels of leadership. And that is the crisis this country faces. It's a trust crisis.
And this trust crisis is being expounded by history, because you do have MPs like Joseph Sewungu coming out to say opposition, they really work together in the initial stages, but then when you get closer to the election, they start to disintegrate because of selfish reasons. But the voter doesn't know, why do they disintegrate close to the election, yet everything is moving on so well?
I have a problem with that, with the narrative opposition. You know, it doesn't really work for us. It's part of our problem. It's to cast this as opposition versus no. This, as I said, I want to emphasize, is country. It's the whole country. If the country doesn't unite in order to transit, to transform, to transition to a better future, we are doomed together. So that's the first thing. We can't keep casting this narrative, opposition has failed to come together. But show me what has come together in General Museveni's government. Just show it to me. It's a crisis across the board. That's number one. Number two, it's that, yes, it's the challenge of leadership today. And so that's what we who lead anywhere, that's what Kano Besigye, Honorable Bobby Kyagulanyi, the Speaker of Parliament, General Museveni, the military leadership, they all have to prove, they all have to show. Why? Because the tragedy today is that it's as though the citizen is left out in this whole thing. The citizen doesn't matter. The voter is there to be used, abused, and disposed of. People come to the election recognizing we are not in this game, so let's make the most out of it. It's a tragedy that we are faced with. So it's a crisis of leadership, and we all must address it. So I would hope that the United Forces for Change recognize the nature, the enormity of the challenge before them, that anybody in any form of leadership recognizes that enormity of the challenge, and we muscle our energies to be able to address it. We choose, we make the choice to be different. That's the challenge before us.
And of course, you did mention that President Museveni is not mobilizing. But then we are seeing opposition mobilizing. And it got me thinking about...
What did you say? That I said that President
No.
Museveni is not mobilizing? I didn't say that.
Actually,
please. No.
Actually,
He's,
what you
he's
said...
in charge of
okay,
the whole mobilization
opposition is coming down with the United Forces of Change, but
Yes.
President Museveni is not following that direction. But then it got me thinking about General Vidal, Major General Vidal, the deceased, may his soul rest in peace, the Farmers' Party president. And when he died, we ceased to hear about the Farmers' Party as a whole. So it got me thinking, just right now, when you mentioned that when President Museveni leaves the political sphere, won't there be a power vacuum? But that's the story for another day. Let's keep our focus on the political pressure group that has sprang up. Do you think our country's political sphere needs a pressure group as we draw closer to the 2021 general election?
Can we speak more positively? What does this country need?
These are the facts on the ground.
Oh my
You have
goodness.
pressure groups, you have COVID-19, you have floods, you have locusts. This is what we're dealing with, Dr.
That's
Zach
good.
Nerinjere.
That's good. Absolutely. This country, absolutely, no question. This country needs, and I'm very clear, this country needs a way in which we are united to create a future that works for all of us.
Yes.
And a coming together of any forces that seek positive change should be welcome. That needs to include everyone.
Yes.
All right? So I hope that my colleagues and friends are looking beyond
And they're
this
watching.
whole idea of opposition. That's
Yes.
not what this country wants. Because this polarization of the country is not a history we want to take into the future. So the point is this. It should have happened 20 years ago. This is work that started, should have. I mean, I'm a student of the history of Uganda. Things began to completely unravel and come down in ways that were unbelievable around the turn of this century. Things have been getting worse. So the timing, it's late in the day, better late than never. Is it sufficient? Is it adequate? Absolutely not. It's got to show more. Show more. Countries wants to see more.
More of what, Dr. Zach Nerinjere?
More of a leadership that can be trusted on any of the political fronts, that can be trusted, that the hopes, the fears of the ordinary, I mean, I connect deeply with people in the slum communities of this campus, in this city. My God, they are hustlers. Life is hard. I connect with kids in our primary school system. I connect with mothers. One of the most dangerous things to be in this country is to be a mother. I've been engaging with women who are simply saying one of the hidden crises of COVID-19 is pads. Women have no pads, you know? So the cry is for leadership that works for this country. Yes, so the question will be, does the United Forces for Change give hope that this is something different? Will there be forces within the national resistance movement that show this is going to be different? So this is not a question for United Forces for Change alone. It's a question for Museveni and his group. Can you please, for goodness sake, give hope to this country? For goodness sake. That's what the country wants. So these are questions that must be answered. And the questions are not going to be answered by an election. Let me just be clear to you. An election is not going to answer these questions, because an election is going to do precisely what General Museveni likes. He's going to be declared the winner. Can I be clear on that? The result of the 2021 election with General Museveni on the ballot paper is already a foregone conclusion. He will be declared a winner.
But
because it doesn't work.
Speaking of the 2021 general elections, you do have the legislators from the East Africa Legislative Assembly coming out to say that this election should be postponed to give the government more ample time to prepare for the election. But then you have the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda on the other side is saying that, you know what, no. Postponement of this election would be an abrogation of the Constitution. But as Dr. Zach Nerinjere, what is your stand?
Well, you know, General Museveni is very interesting. He once characterized the Constitution as a mere paper. So you've got to remember that's how he thinks about this. I would personally argue, and this is my position, the conversation is not about elections. No. it will not help. I can tell you, it's foregone. We've been at this at the very least, the last 3 elections. It's the same story. General Museveni chooses who are going to be in MPs because he needs a crowd in parliament that endorses everything that he wants and so on. He will be. Elections are not working for this country, and I'm not discussing Kenya or Tanzania or Burundi or Rwanda or East Africa. I'm discussing Uganda.
Yeah.
The conversation really needs to be, what does this country need to transition from a military dictatorship? General Museveni, I think it was last week or the other time, when he characterized himself, and he said the other day we were debating and arguing over Kisanja and so on, and he said, I am simply this, I am simply a freedom fighter. General Museveni has not yet understood his accountability to the country, his accountability to the citizens. And I would say that all the other leaders who seek to provide leadership in this country really need to show themselves to be accountable to the citizenship. So the conversation, in my view, is not about elections, scientific or non-scientific. And by this language of scientific, I mean, presidents are powerful. You see how presidents can create a narrative that begins to look like the truth. This whole scientific, those of us who did many years of studying science and physics, I'm thinking, hello, can we find more real language? And you guys in the media can't even interrogate it. All of you are scientific marriage, scientific election. Please use language that reflects this.
But Dr. Zaknerinje, the word scientific election did not come from Uganda or President Museveni. It came from the United States and these outside countries.
Scientific.
Especially Georgia, when they were holding their primaries. They actually went out there. They did not do scientific elections because they were saying...
You've made it worse for me.
So they went in there, they made the lines, but then there was a problem with the system. So you had so many people
made it worse for me.
Lining up. So what happened in Georgia, there were many cases of coronavirus after that primary. But then the case was that we should head into scientific elections. Remote voting.
Just listen to me. You've made it worse for me.
Remote voting.
You've made it worse for me. You've made it worse for me. Because you are saying this thing came from outside. Yes. When will we stop just parroting what has come from outside and actually ask things that work for us? You know? So remote voting, you know? Or social distancing is a good word, you know? I like actually Tonsemberela. So why don't we call them Tonsemberela elections? Why don't we?
So given the pandemic, would it be rational to have this election? Yes or no?
As I told you, a yes or no, of course, you know, I can't give you a yes or no answer because the country is more complex.
Indeed.
For me, the discussion of elections or no elections, whether COVID or no COVID, is the more important question. Will those elections work for this country? Will it work for the citizens that I just described for you, your generation who are unemployed? And by the way, we've got to answer the question of the levels of unemployment post-COVID-19 lockdown. And I don't say post-COVID-19. COVID-19 is with us. It's going to be with us for a long time. We had better learn how to live with it. It's post-COVID-19 lockdown measures. What's going to come out of the woods? Unemployment. So the question we must ask is not elections of what nature, science or not science, remote or not. The question is, what do elections do for this country? And my argument is elections are not working. Now, it could be an opportunity. It could be an opportunity to champion a cause. It could be an opportunity to message to this country. This is the country we need to work for. Absolutely. And hopefully people emerge out of the woods that represent the kind of leadership this country wants. Hopefully. Can that happen during this lockdown? My own view is this. General Yoweri Museveni has the whole platform to himself. You know, he's the only one who is allowed to speak. So until there are very clear measures in which the ground is level, General Museveni is the one speaking to the whole country all the time, anytime. Of course, he's the president, but he's taking the advantage as well to do the campaigning in the way food is distributed. Do you notice? NRM yellow people are the ones distributing food with the soldiers. Anybody from a different color trying to do the same is harassed. So what we have to admit is this COVID-19 lockdown is giving preferential space to those who will state power now. If that question is not addressed, so I would actually hope that those who are in DP, UPC, FDC, NRM actually begin to argue. What I would hope iPod does, this is this iPod thing,
yes.
What they should be arguing for is SOPs for people to engage with the public, whatever their political shade is. Whatever their political shade is. This idea that you're going to do the people are going to speak on radios. Already Uganda Communications Commission is preparing itself. Remember, they are preparing themselves to lock down any media house that hosts a member of who is contrary to what General Museveni is thinking. So, honestly, we are not in, I mean, COVID-19 has made worse our situation of lack of freedom of assembly, lack of freedom of association, the idea that the alternative voice, the voice other than General Museveni's, cannot be heard. That's the challenge we're faced up with. And I would say that's what those who seek electoral processes or procedural processes should be asking themselves. Is it possible to have a leveled ground under COVID-19? And if we can't answer that question in the affirmative, let's then discuss elections, no elections in this season, because the critical question is leveled ground. And I would argue right now, doesn't exist.
And my question would be, what are some of those proposals that would offer a leveled ground? That's the question that you're going to answer after we listen into some of the submissions coming in from the Lord Mayor of Kampala, that is Elias Lukwago. Yes. My reporter, Stephen Mbide, will be joining us from Wakaliga for that conversation. Yes, there he is. Very good morning, Mr. Mbide. You're in Wakaliga. You're about to speak to the Lord Mayor. What's the latest?
Here at Wakaliga, at the home of the Lord Mayor Elias Lukwago, who is also the Vice President of the People's Government Formation, but these days is also becoming a ragamuffin of sorts because, you know, he's now venturing into some music. Good morning, Omrodi.
Thank you. Morning.
I don't know which stage name you're going to be using these days, now that you're venturing into music.
Well, that's one matter where I'm not an expert, but I'm trying my level best.
Okay. Okay, Omrod. Now, yesterday you launched No NEDA, a campaign that is trying to bring together opposition forces under the uniform of United Forces of Change. I don't know how much you can add on to the political scene now, just barely 6 months into the upcoming election.
Well, this campaign is tailored on two things. One, the fight against COVID, which apparently is being monopolized by General Kaguta Museveni. You have time and again said he's treating it as a personal war, excluding all other stakeholders. And increasingly, it's coming out that this is turning out to be a business venture for most of the NRM guys who are involved. You can see how they are riddled in scandals. I mean, how the whole project is riddled in scandals. Rather, with the scandals, there are lots of scandals within that project. Many people have not gotten ready food, as you know, and many people have not been assisted one way or the other in the post-lockdown period we have entered into. And of course, you have had voices coming out from some of the ministers that probably we may enter into another bout or another phase of a lockdown. And you can see that kind of politics which they are trying to play. That is one aspect. The other one is about the politics of this country. Because again, Mr. Museveni has used this period to entrench his authority, his power, his tentacles. And increasingly, again, it's becoming very, very clear that is preparing him to organize again yet another sham election. So we have to step up the measures to ensure that the people of Uganda regain their authority, their power. The hallmark of our constitution is people's sovereign authority, sovereignty of the people. But the irony is that people do not have the powers to determine who should govern them and how they should be governed. The people of Uganda have little influence on the politics of this country and the governance in general. Yeah.
You are leading the people of Uganda, just like you were saying, you, the opposition leaders. Isn't it so suspicious that the FDC, rather DP and UPC, who are also members of the United Forces of Change, but they are absent, also TDA, rather Alliance for National Transformation, they were absent from your work meeting yesterday. Isn't it so suspicious? What is this saying about the opposition in Uganda?
Well, there is this notion of a coalition of the willing. You can't force people formations into a platform, into an arrangement where they may not necessarily be comfortable. But of course, you need also to understand that there is always a beginning. We needed to start from somewhere, and I'm sure others will join along the way. We said this is not actually an amalgamation of political entities or formations or political parties. It's not a merger. Neither is it a consortium of political formations per se. No. It's a platform for all democracy-seeking forces, including civil society, religious leaders or religious organizations, individuals who are political. It could be even members of the press and so on and so forth. So it's for Ugandans. But we needed to have that nucleus. We needed to have that particular point where people, where other forces should coalesce. And I think we have prepared the ground for other forces to come on board. And I'm sure along the way they will join us because we are fighting for a good cause.
Talking about the good cause, in the previous elections and campaigns, retired Bishop Dr. Zack Ninjie, who is in studio right now watching us, and you, Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago, and other opposition leaders, like in the 2015, you had a campaign of rallying political actors and civil society. By then, Bishop Zack was from the civil society. You tried to come up with the formation that is the umbrella of TDA, but still you didn't unseat this government. These United Forces of Change may also fail to unseat this government if you are not really united and the cause is not the one of the people that you are talking about.
Well, I'm glad my brother Bishop Nirinje is within the studio and I salute him. You are trying to draw parallels between this new platform and TDA, and I think that's a misconception. The two are totally different. TDA was an electoral alliance. It was focusing on bringing together different forces to choose a candidate who would take on General Museveni,
which fell apart.
Of course, there were attempts, there were efforts that were made, and I must commend my brother Bishop Nirinje for all the efforts they put in that particular venture. And one or the other, there were some achievements that were registered, though we did not achieve the overall object and purpose of that particular formation. But this arrangement we came up yesterday, or we unveiled yesterday, is a little different. It's a front. It's a front to advance the struggle to liberate this country. A front to ensure that Ugandans are empowered to defend the sovereignty of the people and ensure that actually we have free and fair elections as one of the elements.
Mr. Lord Mayor, what will be so different in the strategy that will lead you to success in your efforts? Because the different attempts have been in place, but they will still really no bigger success. I just want to understand what will be so different this time around that will lead you to success in unseating the regime.
Like I've said, it's about galvanizing different efforts of, all the stakeholders, all Ugandans, to exert pressure on the powers that be so that we can have political space in our country, so that we can liberate ourselves, so that we can get out of the jaws of the NRM regime, actually a cabal which has captured state power, the instruments of power. It's not even the NRM, but there is that group of people who have captured the state power, and they are using it as a political platform to subjugate the rest of us. So now this front is about that, is focusing on that struggle. Because right now, like you've heard, Mr. Museveni is preparing a sham election. We must fight against that. You've had Ugandans are being called upon to not to assert themselves. That is absurd. We are saying no. Ugandans must have power to influence public policy, must have power to influence governance and politics of this country must take charge of the destiny of this country.
As you sit in Wakiso and today as you move out to carry on that campaign, just know that also the Electoral Commission is sitting today to announce a new revised roadmap. I just want to understand from you, you're also a stakeholder in this election that's coming up. What would you want to be changed in this roadmap that is going to be, of course, unveiled today? We don't know yet, but at least for now, you know there are things that you need to be changed if you are to have a free and fair election 2021.
Of course, like I said, Mr. Museveni is using this unfortunate situation to leverage his political fortunes. This is very, very unfortunate. And this is what we are fighting to foil, because it's our obligation to foil his mission, to foil his maneuvers. It's an obligation, a constitutional command. The program, the roadmap, the EC is rolling out, has got a background. We are told, actually, and it's on good record, that they have had engagements with General Museveni and other people within the government to come up with those maneuvers. So what they are coming up with is what they call a scientific election, where campaigns are going to be conducted through the media. And it's the reason now they are talking of...
What would you lose with that, if that is the plan? What would you lose? Because I thought you would still use the media. Like now you're on TV, you would be reaching the masses. What would you lose in that?
How many people have got access to the media?
It's going to distribute TVs and radio
because
stations.
Right now you have close to 18 million voters. Tell me, how many villages he have got electricity? He's going to distribute radio stations to 10 million people, like he said. Does he even have the capacity to do that? They talked about distributing food to only this small area here, Kampala and Wakiso. You just cut out, conduct a survey here and ask how many homes received that food. They didn't. They have talked time and again they are going to distribute.
So what would you want to be changed?
They are talking of distributing masks. And it was made a condition precedent that before they open up, before they ease the lockdown, on especially mass public transport, they must have those masks. So how many people have received those masks? They talked of 30 million people to receive the masks. How many have received? How many people have received the TV sets they are talking about? And where is the budget support anyway? So all these machinations are intended to organize a sham election. So we are saying we cannot give Mr. Museveni this latitude to go ahead with that kind of a cosmetic election just to legitimize his dictatorship.
The person you're talking about is now, you've been always saying that he's not failing to fight corruption, and he's telling you now this is the time that he's going to deal with the thieves in the different agencies and institutions. Of course, he said he began with URA, is now moving to your seat, that is KCCA, and trying to reorganize it. And maybe
is that how they fight corruption?
He's saying he's coming out and
how many individuals were prosecuted? Yes. If indeed the reason they purged those people in URA was corruption, is that what the law says? If you get somebody placing their hands in our national coffers, in our till, you just chase them away from the job, you have to prosecute them. Tell me how many people in the cases, how many leaders have taken to the courts in the anti-corruption court?
What would you want to be done if he's really serious, if government is really committed to fighting corruption? What would you want to be done away from prosecuting these people?
Of course he has. Mr. Museveni has no political will to fight corruption. This is what I'm saying. And fighting corruption starts with that. Himself lacks moral authority even to talk about those people, because they know what he's doing. The raison d'etat of this regime is corruption. The reason, the blood flowing in his vein, I'm sorry to say this, the veins of NRM, let me not personalize, the veins of NRM are surviving on corruption. That's the reason actually he had to buy members of parliament to create his eligibility for another election.
Mr. Lord Mayor, someone will say that even at your seat, at City Hall, all is not well. You're talking about State House, you're talking about NRM and government, but also all is not well at your institution, because many of the councillors, when you say this, when you say let's walk using left, they walk using right. When you say let's vote so-and-so, they vote so-and-so. And also now, the president is coming towards your backyard, also trying to see that those people you've been calling loyal to you are now trying to move towards his direction. All is not well at your side.
Of course, that is his politics, politics of manipulation, politics of divide and rule, politics of patronage. Everybody looks up to Mr. Museveni for survival. That's the problem. But for me, I don't begrudge anyone who takes their own decisions, because this is a free world. I don't know what informs the decisions of many people.
Isn't that a lack of trust in you who's holding the mantle at KCCA that, yes, when you say, let's follow this route,
No, I don't believe in
a vote of no confidence in you?
No. I don't believe in monolithism. I don't want to frog match people. These are adults of sound mind who can take their own rational decisions on their own free will. So I believe in that. As long as their conscience tells them this is the direction they should take, so be it. So for me, I don't begrudge anyone on that particular point. My problem is with Mr. Museveni mastering it. I mean, entrenching that kind of politics within the body politic of this country. Politics of patronage, politics of manipulation, and politics of divide and rule. It's very, very bad.
Just before we leave KCCA, yes, the 3 days that you gave your deputy are elapsing today. Has she picked up your call? And then, would you describe this as backstabbing you or betraying the city? Now that it also all shows that the deputy road mayor is now going to be going into the direction of being a director of jail.
Well, I don't want to sound judgmental, and I've desisted from that particular temptation because up to now I want to give my dear sister Sarah Kanyike the benefit of the doubt on what exactly
all indication is sure that she's going,
but the deadline is today. So I think it will be premature for me to come up with a judgment on this particular matter before I hear from her, because the deadline I gave is close of business.
But why would you lose sleep with someone who is going to work within your vicinity, is going to complement your work? As the Lord Mayor is a director, so I think you'll be now working together to develop the city and serve the people of Kampala. Why would you lose sleep?
Two things here. The destabilization of the office of the Lord Mayor. You have a person who is serving in the capacity of Deputy Lord Mayor, and the term has not yet come to an end. And that very person is given an assignment of the minister in charge of gender, community development, and production. That is the docket she's been assigned to this, I think, last month when we had the council. Hardly a month in office, you come and appoint her in a subordinate, in a junior position within the same ministry, because now she's been appointed director in charge of the gender, community development, and production, where she's been appointed and been serving as a minister, where she has been serving as the deputy Lord Mayor. And now you bring her as a junior staff.
She'll be at the technical wing.
Yes?
She'll be at the technical wing.
Yes, that makes her a junior staff. This is what I'm saying. Today previously, she'll have more benefits. Let's not even talk about the benefits. She's been a supervisor of that particular directorate. Now you are saying she's going to be supervised. Why demote my deputy? That is one thing. The other thing is about a by-election. Because now the crisis Mr. Museveni has caused, we are supposed to have a by-election. She's a councillor representing Machinde East.
As we wind up this conversation, what are you doing today as the Forces of Change?
No, today we are starting the campaign of No NEDA to hear out to the people there. The voices they must come up with it to say enough is enough, to say no to corruption, say no to impunity, say no to bad governance, say no to a life presidents, say no to injustices which are being committed to governance, say no to extrajudicial murders, say no to starvation, say no to all these.
Police has summoned you. Will you be going there? Police has summoned you as...
I've not been summoned. Is that what the...
He was on TV, the spokesperson of police, Fred Enanga, saying that
can I? Mr. Onanga, how do you summon me on TV? Honestly, that's abuse of office. He knows what to do. If I'm required to appear before police and record a statement, please follow the procedure.
Very finally.
Actually, they made it in the Rarotunu case. It was made very, very clear. The Constitutional Court pronounced itself on the matter and said it's not necessary. I mean, it's not mandatory
Senior lawyer Elias Lukwago. Yes. This week, the Chief Justice Bat Magunda Katurebe will be retiring. Any word about his reign as the Chief Justice of Uganda? Any word for him as we wind up? 1 minute.
Well, I wish him a nice retirement, and he has had his own stint at that particular, in that particular position, with all the challenges afflicting the institutions of this country, the state institutions and organs. But one little thing about that, my Lord, the Chief Justice, with all due respect, we shall always remember that Tojikwatako case.
Thank you.
Anyway, let me leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
Please, I wish you a nice retirement.
Thank you so much, the Lord Mayor Elias Lukwago, who is also the People's Government Vice President, and he's a lawyer. Stephen Imbide here.
Thank you very much, Stephen Imbide. I still do have Dr. Zach Nidinjie, the former Assistant Bishop of Kampala. Well, we're still having this discussion, but then just humbly make some additions to what Mr. Lukwago was saying. He did mention that TDA was meant to actually front one candidate, and this coalition, United Forces for Change, is meant to galvanize the whole support of all the people of Uganda to Charles Museveni. Was he being
well, actually, I was listening to him, and I was kind of surprised that that's what Honorable Lukwago thought about what TDA was. TDA was a much bigger idea, much bigger. Much bigger than just an electoral alliance. It was about positive change for the country. We're very, very clear on a future that we had, cast. Remember, it is one that had emerged out of the citizens' pressure for leveling the ground, for electoral reforms, for free and fair elections. We had gone across the country. So it came out of a process for the whole country in which everybody was involved, NRM, FDC, DP, and the idea was we can work together for the future of the country. So for him to just reduce it to A, an electoral alliance, B, about a political candidate, that was only one aspect of it, but it was much bigger. It was an idea, and the idea remains, by the way. The platform may have collapsed, but the idea remains. There's absolutely no question that until this country comes together to imagine a future together and therefore work together and assure people like General Museveni and those who are benefiting from the rot right now going on, that future that we imagine is also includes you. Because I hate a history in which every president must go into exile. Everyone who has had any substantial leadership must end up in jail. No. And that's why actually we were, part of that process reflected in a transition on a whole process of truth and national reconciliation. Truth and national reconciliation. There was a clear timeline on when all these things needed to happen. So there is absolutely no question in my mind that if we are to imagine that future together, there are certain things that this country must do. Truth-telling, national reconciliation, the inequalities of this country that are across, the statistics are very clear that the growth, the economies of this country are not even. Ugandans don't have equal access to the national cake. So we've got to deal with a history of violence. This whole idea is that you've had an army. Just to remind you, in the colonial time, the army was predominantly people from northern Uganda. I mean, the colonialists had a terrible way of imagining how you create a security system. Very sad. That was inherited by Milton Obote. He didn't transform it. He didn't. Instead, he entrenched it. General Idi Amin came and reconstituted the military into his own image. You remember the people who created that force. General Yoweri Museveni hasn't done anything different. He's reconstituted the military and security machinery into his own image. It's public knowledge. Most of the commanders come from the people who really run the military and security machinery come from a particular region. We can't continue that story. We can't. There's got to be a way in which the country is together. And so a whole story, remember how violence, and it moved from Buganda, 1965, 67, violence. Then during the Idi Amin, moves to Lango, Acholi have done this history.
Yes.
Then when Idi Amin is overthrown, violence. I mean, the massacres have not been told of West Nile post the Idi Amin regime. Then Luwero, you know?
Yes.
And then Luwero, and then you remember the Mukura massacres?
Indeed.
If we don't deal with this history, people haven't forgotten. There are children and grandchildren of these orphans, of these widows, you know. And now I say to my friends, you know, they call me Westerner Munyankore. I am saying to you, us Munyankore Westerners, if we don't address the question, you know, there is a way in which violence follows the highest density for guns. Today, the highest density per capita of guns in this country is that region. Because if you check where the commanders, there's a time they did an audit of the police force under General Kale Kaihura, and the DPCs were literally, in terms of proportions, were coming from a particular. If we don't address these questions, then people will say, this country is not for us together. So, truth-telling, national reconciliation. This is a country that has produced too many widows, too many orphans. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain. That must be dealt with. So within the TDA idea, all this was factored in. An economy that works for everyone. It was very, very clear, you know, that you can't have the inequalities that reflect in this country and hope for the same future. So there was a clear agenda for creating an economy that works for the country. A clear governance process. Very clear that the country needs a transition. What's happened in this country is that this country has never had an effective transition, actually, from the colonial period.
And how will that transition be achieved, and what is the role, the ideal role that religious leaders are playing to achieve this target?
Absolutely. The challenge of religious faith and cultural leadership is how they have generally been co-opted constantly by different regimes. And really the challenge for religious faith and cultural leadership is to free themselves of this captivity, this capture, and be able to hold accountable those who manage the state, those who manage public goods and public services. And absolutely, the pressure points ought to come from these centers of influence, from religious leadership, cultural leadership, other civil society centers, such as trade unions, the business community, the professional associations, those groups, trade unions. Of course, General Museveni is very sharp. He's made sure he captures all these, and they are part of his, you know, I sometimes see Kasita leadership, I see my friend in the trade union, and I see some of my bishop friends and so on. They're all singing the praises of General Museveni. No, this is not what our role is. Our role is to hold him accountable. Hold him accountable to the priorities of the country. That's our job. So part of what really needs to happen is the resuscitation, is the disengagement of these centers from being associated with political power and those that abuse it,
Indeed.
and be able to hold it accountable. What is desperate is that these leaders need to be the centers of accountability. That's necessary.
But what
and in that, in the TDA machinery,
yes.
we were very clear that there needs to be a way in which you create a political front that is itself held accountable to the citizens. That's necessary. Not a way in which you transform citizenship to support, to legitimize, which is what elections have been doing.
But we've seen some kind of resistance from the religious circles. You have the House of Bishops that didn't want to toe that line of politics. The House of Bishops simply wanted to be the purveyors of the gospel and not political discourse in that regard. And they contend that's maybe the reason you had some problems with the House of Bishops, because Dr. Zach Nirinjie is a political activist, and the House of Bishops wanted to keep in that religious sphere. What does that make? What do you think is this situation?
All our lives are political. All our lives are political. Education is political. Healthcare is political. Agriculture is political. Business is political. Anybody who says to you, I am not being involved in political processes, that's a political statement. They've chosen to associate with those who abuse power. That's the point. Silence is a political statement.
Should political leaders be involved in politics? Such questions abound.
No. That question is misplaced. Because if you are a cultural or religious leader or a faith leader, you occupy a political position. By political, make the distinction between partisan, it's not NRM, FDC. That's cheap, that's less the most significant. Politics is about how people connect together in life. Politics is about the distribution, access of public goods and services. If faith and cultural leaders are not interested in those things, then honestly they are irrelevant, completely irrelevant to the lives of the people. This whole idea of spiritual, what does it mean? Jesus, the prayer he taught us, what does it say? Father, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I am a student of religion. I haven't known any religion that says just focus on heaven without focusing on what happens on earth. Let me tell you, life of heaven starts here on earth. Absolutely. So any such language from any religious leader, when you ever hear a religious leader say, me, I'm not, so I'm just, okay, just ask them, so tell us something more about education. Tell us about agriculture. Tell us about, so shift it from that, and then he'll certainly become alive. So, okay, so let's talk about education. Let's talk about healthcare. Those are the things that matter in people's lives. And that is real politics. Have you noticed, General Museveni? Very clear. Healthcare, education, roads. That's serious politics. Absolutely. So, I encourage my fellow faith and religious leaders, don't delegitimize yourselves by saying we are not politicians. No. You have a political role because you have a role to shape where the country goes. Why? Because Jesus has called us to serve him here on earth.
And I'm afraid we've run out of time. But
that is our work, and that is where. And honestly, part of the lamentation is the absence of the voice of sanity, the voice of conscience from faith, religious, cultural leadership, from the professional, from the trade unions, from the guys who actually could run the economy. So we need that voice more than ever, not just the voice of Colonel Besigye, not just the voice of Honorable Kyagulanyi, not only the voice of some of my friends within the NRM system, and they're there. Let's move the country forward together.
And I heard you liken the Uganda matters to political matters. Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
I was reading that article and I was amazed.
They were killed by a politician.
Defying Mwanga. So that was political defiance.
Oh, absolutely. So we need to see more faith leaders defying the abuse of power, the abuse of trust, the abuse of trust. That's what we need to see faith and religious leaders doing more.
Dr. Zack Nyiringyire, the former Kampala Assistant Bishop, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to NTV.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And thank you for keeping it NTV, our very beautiful viewer. We are going to take a very short break. We'll be right back with more information. Keep it here on NTV.